Hello everybody and welcome to the Walt Disney Q&A. This is the series in which you guys send me questions all manner of Disney related and I try to answer them to the best of my abilities. Today, like always, we are wandering around MC Magic, the 1-to-1 scale recreation of Walt Disney World here in the game of Minecraft. I've got a bunch of questions in front of me. I'm ready to jump right in and start answering them, so why wait? First question comes from Lynn Ashley Ward, who asks, I have a question for your next Q&A video. What kind of night show would you put in the animal kingdom, disregarding the fact that it would bother the animals? Thank you and have a magical day. Interesting question. Disregarding that animals would be bothered, I still would shy away from fireworks, and it's not because I dislike fireworks. You know, this is me playing Imagineer for a minute. It's because I think between all the other three parks, you get plenty of fireworks, and I think we need to bring back lasers. Lasers are awesome. Let's just make a laser show. I don't know what to do beyond that. All I know is question, night show, answer, lasers. Lasers are always the answer. Our next question comes from Jacob Harbor, who asks, what do you think about Disney Shanghai not having a main street? It's the first Disney park to not have it, and I'm kind of upset. What are your thoughts? I'm not upset about it. Like you mentioned, there's going to be a lot of stuff that isn't at Shanghai Disneyland. There's not going to be a main street. There's not going to be a railroad. There's not going to be a space mountain. There's no official answer as to why all these things are getting left out. I don't think it's a bad thing that they're getting left out. This is my personal take, and if you look at them, again, not speaking for Disney, don't know what their reasons for what their reasons for this were, but if you look at a map, you've got your Disneyland in the West Coast, and you've got your Disney World on the East Coast. You've got Disneyland Paris over in Europe, but if you look over, in Asia, you've got Tokyo Disneyland, you've got Shanghai, you've got Hong Kong, which also has its own Disneyland. And while they're not like with a day's drive or anything, they are relatively close. And so I almost wonder if part of the reason that they're designing this so differently is because they want to make sure that these parks are different enough that somebody in the region doesn't just think that picking where to go, which Disney to go to, is like picking a number out of a hat, that it's all the same and doesn't matter. It's going to definitely be a different experience. I think that could be a great thing. I think that allows for the Imagineers to get more creative rather than just going back into the books and saying, all right, we need another Space Mountain, we need another Main Street, we need another railroad. This gives them the opportunity to go, okay, well, and this is what my revisiting series just sort of celebrates is, what happens if you're forced to say, well, we can't use these classic Disney staples. How can we still make a great Disney experience? So I'm looking forward to seeing how the park turns out when it opens and what it's like, and doesn't upset me at all. Our next question comes from Obx Boats. I always pronounce your name weird. Obx Boats. Here's a good question. Disney has confirmed that the FastPass Plus is coming to Disneyland. Do you think this is a good thing? Also, do you think Disney should show different images for which version of Soarin' is on? Also, do you think Disney Pixar will make an up to? Great questions. Up to. I don't know. I don't see that one happening. I don't know why. I think part of it is when you think of the Pixar films that are getting sequels, like The Incredibles and like Finding Nemo and Toy Story, and I think a lot of that is not just is there a story to tell, but is it gonna be financially viable? Is it, Cars 2 I think would never have happened if not for the fact that Cars from merchandise perspective was wildly successful. Like, it made them so much more money than any of the other Pixar films were making them. So I think that's a question that's worth keeping in mind, and I think when you look at Up, that was a fantastic film, but I don't see an Up 2 being like a merchandise goldmine. I don't see there being a story that needs to be told, so I don't see that happening, but you never know. In regards to Soarin', yes, I think, it's all video on a screen. Why not make them all different? My original idea was to put multiple types of Soarins in the different countries in Epcot rather than in the future world, and to have each film that you see when you're on Soarin' be catered to that country, so you get to see that country from above. And lastly, FastPass Plus coming to Disneyland. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Disney poured a lot of money into the R&D for this sort of system, and especially the Magic Bands. And so seeing all of this stuff being moved over to the other parks just means it's working out well in Disney World. So I think that's a good thing. Our next question comes from Hannah Rocco, who says, I have a question. I recently heard that in the summer, Disney World will be closing Pirates of the Caribbean for 6 months. Have you heard about this too? If so, what are your thoughts, and what do you think they will be doing with the ride that'll take 6 months? I will personally be upset because Pirates of the Caribbean is one of my favorite movie series, so it's always a must ride for my family when we go, but it'll still be closed when we're down in November. So bad news is, yes, that is the case. It is expected to close. I'm reading the report on wdwmagic.com that says Pirates of the Caribbean is expected to close for an extensive refurbishment later this year. And that within that time period you mentioned is summer to the end of 2015, reopening in time for the holidays. And the reason that they give in the article here is that it's experiencing a number of show and ride system issues that require lengthy closure. Animatronic issues, audio problems, issues with the boats taking on water. So Disney hasn't officially spoken to this, so I don't want to say yes, it's definitely going to happen. And even if it does, who knows? Maybe that 6-month number was just being thrown around by the company, and it's not really going to be the case. That said, it does sound like the sort of thing, considering they just refurbed it to add in Jack Sparrow. My guess is it wouldn't be the sort of refurbishment where they're adding new content. It would be the sort of refurbishment where they're upgrading systems, whether it's rides, lighting, wiring, that sort of thing. Which seems like a boring upgrade, but it's great because it shows that Disney is committed to keeping this attraction going. I still appreciate it because it means that that ride's going to be around for a while longer. That is a bummer if it closes. In fact, I'm planning to hopefully go maybe for a really short trip at the beginning of the summer and for a longer trip at the end. So it sounds like I might be missing Pirates of the Caribbean too, which is a bummer. Our next question comes from Sarah. Oh my goodness, I cannot pronounce his last name. I apologize. Dakujian? Sarah Dakujian. I hope I'm pronouncing that close. Says, here's my question. What do you think about the choices of Magic Band colors? I personally wish they had a purple, but like the green, pink, and yellow. What are your favorites, and which one do you think they should add? Second question is, what do you think of the Haunted Mansion shop, Memento Mori, and what do you think they should do next? Thanks and have a magical day. So, Sarah, a lot of questions about stuff I can't really talk about because I'm just so inexperienced. So for one, I haven't been to Disney since Memento Mori opened, so I don't know what it's like. I can look up pictures, but I'd love to go and experience it firsthand before I weigh in on it. I think the idea of it's fine. I think it's great because the Haunted Mansion is such an iconic attraction that it deserves its own shop, in my opinion. And I can't wait to see what sort of merch is there because as a big fan of the attraction, I'm sure there's stuff I'd like to pick up. And I would love to see, as far as what's next for that train of thought, I would love to see them sort of redo Space Mountain shop because I think that's sort of generic. It feels outdated. It feels like it was the same shop that it was in the 90s. And maybe it has changed since I've been in 2012, but I feel like that's another one where it's so iconic and classic that you could give it it's really a good dedicated shop with some good merch there. As for the Magic Band colors, having never used one because I haven't been to Disney since they introduced them, I'm all for just a plain old red. Just give me a red Magic Band. I just want a Magic Band. I need to go to Disney so I could get a Magic Band. And it's interesting that you're saying that you wish they had purple, so I guess they don't. I haven't looked too far into it, but my assumption when they first announced this was they're going to make a killing on merchandising by coming up with all these different Magic Band colors and patterns. And I know there are some out there, but I really was expecting it to be, maybe almost as varied as pin trading, where it's just there's so many options. So it's crazy that they don't have a purple. I would hope they would as well. And especially when you think about, and maybe this goes into production issues that I'm unaware of because I don't work in manufacturing, but I would love to see, similar to, if you go to certain shoe websites today, you can actually custom make shoes that you like. Pick the colors of, the sole and the color of the laces, and you can create your own or put up a pattern. So I'm surprised they don't have a service like that where you could just like upload a pattern. So like say it's the Johnson family reunion and you could get that as a like text file or a, you could design a little pattern for it and have custom magic bands made for that, purpose. I think there's a gold mine there that maybe they're waiting to tap before, they dive too deep into it, or maybe they haven't thought of it, in which case, Bob Iger, the idea is all yours. All you have to do is hire me. But I would assume that eventually there'll be just a wide selection. Our next question comes from Twitter. @CyberChampMC says, do you think different franchises should be in Hollywood studios to return to the movie theme of the park? For example, The Wizard of Oz. I think there are two answers. Do I think there should be? Sure. I would love to see more of that. I was always, I never liked the hat. And the reason I didn't like the hat is because it was a Disney-centric icon. When I thought the park, despite being a Disney park, was about Hollywood as a whole. Whereas the Chinese theater was a great icon because it felt like that more fully represented Hollywood as a whole. So I'm all for non-Disney franchises being in the park. That said, realistically, it's not going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. Disney just invested a lot of money into Marvel, a lot of money into Star Wars, and they've got this deal with Avatar. I think, in general, Pixar they picked up. So I think they're going to be investing more into representing those franchises more so they get a little bit of return on their part. So I think you're going to see less of those franchises, although I would love to. I would really love to. Our next question comes from Zatstar, who says, I think it's time for the Jungle Cruise to go. Whoa, those are fighting words. The plot of the land it is in takes up more than half of Adventureland. Don't you think 2 new attractions based on Indiana Jones or Tarzan would be better? When I go, I always ride the cruise because I feel it's an obligation, not a choice. Okay, interesting. So I understand what people feel like when I revisit attractions because I'm a huge fan of the Jungle Cruise and I don't think it should go. But I do understand it does take up a lot of space. It is older. It is getting antiquated. And so I wouldn't be surprised if it did go. And I wouldn't be upset if it went because that means there's more room for something new and different. I'd be interested in like sizing it out and seeing if it really does have enough space for 2 whole attractions. My guess is it would be like 1 decent size attraction or 2 like Star Tours sized attractions where you're sort of in place. But I think in Indiana Jones, I think that'd be a great place for an Indiana Jones attraction. Not one that's based on the Indiana Jones ride in Disneyland, but something totally new, totally original, maybe to coincide with a reboot of Indiana Jones. Disney, make it happen. Replace Harrison Ford. He's old. I get it. He's indie. But I think the character is much more than Harrison Ford, and we can reboot it. And actually, there's a question coming up in that, so I'll stop there. And then you pose an interesting video idea of going through and talking about what'll be around in 30 years and what won't. That's a tough one to consider because I feel like 30 years, that's a long time. And some of the old attractions at that point will be what, like 70-ish years old at that. That's a long time for an attraction to be around. You almost would wonder if they'll all be different or if it's the sort of thing where all the attractions will change enough that they don't resemble what they used to. I don't know. That's a good question. Our next question comes from, let's just jump to the one that's relevant. Jordan Mann asks, I don't know if it's new or not, but what do you think of Chris Pratt, Skylord from Guardians of the Galaxy, or from Andy from Parks and Rec, being Indiana Jones in a remake of Indiana Jones? So as you might have picked up from that last question, I am all in favor of rebooting Indiana Jones, going into his past. I think a lot of people think Harrison Ford is Indiana Jones and that it would be blasphemous to have somebody portray Indy without Harrison Ford. But I do think the character is bigger than that. And I think if you find the right actor, you can have somebody else play Indiana Jones. I'm sure at a certain point, even though he wasn't the first, people would have said that the idea of James Bond without Sean Connery would have been madness. But, you get someone else to do it and you keep going. And the character, like James Bond, Indiana Jones, this description always stuck with me. It's not what he brings to the table, Harrison. I think when you think of Indiana Jones, you think about the whip, you think about the hat, you think about that attitude. And Harrison's at an age where I don't think he could portray that, not because he doesn't have the talent, but because we don't think of an old person being Indiana Jones. So I think that era is over. I think we think of a young, adventurous person. I think that's why Nate Drake in Uncharted is almost like an unofficial Indiana Jones. As for whether or not Chris Pratt would make a good Indy, I think we're going to see this summer. You know, I think he was great in Guardians of the Galaxy. I think he's great in Parks and Rec. But I think importantly, what you're seeing there is he's funny, and he can do action and be funny at the same time. But I think part of Indy as a character is he needs to have moments where he can be dead serious. And I think we're going to see it this summer, because I think we're going to see that in his character in Jurassic World. And whether that goes well or not, I think would be the determining factor over whether he would make a good Indy. But I think age-wise, looks, just sort of that personality, I think it's a good step, you know. Otherwise, I can't think of anybody else who might make a good Indiana Jones. I'm trying to think, and no, I can't. That'll be a good one for later. I don't know. That's a good game of what if. Who would make a good Indiana Jones? Let me know in the comments. Going back, our question, Julian Suarez asks, what do you think, what would Disney have done if Harry Potter Theme Park Land was in their hands? I mean, there was talk that was going to happen, and the talks with J.K. Rowling fell apart, so it could have happened. I think you would have seen it in Hollywood Studios. I think, I actually don't think it would have been a good thing. I think at that point, with them getting Harry Potter World, or whatever you want to call it, and then also acquiring Marvel, Universal would have really been stuck, and they would have really had a tough time. And I am a believer that competition is great for innovation, and by getting Harry Potter Land or World, or I know there's an actual name for it, but I'm not a big enough Universal fan to know it, sorry. They forced Disney to step up their game, and that might be why we're seeing, you know, all the Star Wars stuff about to get added to compete with that. So I'm glad it actually didn't fall in Disney's hands. I would almost be afraid that if they got all this stuff, Disney would grow a little lazy, because their competition would be just totally, you know, up a creek and not know what to do to compete with that. So I think things turned out pretty well. And finally this week, our final question comes from Copycat705, who says, what do you think we'll see at the D23 Expo in August, specifically park related? Thanks, and make sure to have a very merry February 13th. Because it's your birthday and all. Oh, look at that. Sorry it's a little belated, but happy belated birthday. I think we're going to see Star Wars. I think we're going to see a lot of Star Wars. I think the reason for that being that plans will be a little more solidified. I think the other reason is because that'll be in August. You have Star Wars coming out in December, so they're going to be really hyping up Star Wars. I think by that point we should have already gotten another trailer for the movie, so I think they'll be in full Star Wars mode. Maybe you'll see a little bit about Avatar Land. I don't think they'll touch Indiana Jones or anything else. I think it's just going to be Star Wars, Star Wars, Star Wars, and I'm excited for it. Anyway, I want to thank you all for the questions you sent me. If you have a question, feel free to leave it in the comments below, or you can tweet it at me. I'm at RobPlays. I try to get to as many as possible. I want to thank you all for watching. Whatever you're doing this week, make the most of it, because it makes it that much better. And I hope to see you next time for the next Disney Q&A. Bye, everybody.